Hello and welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman. Today I want to get back to a quilt as you go of our table runner. This is one of the blocks that we were working on the other day, and hopefully you've had an opportunity to finish yours. I'll link the tutorial in the description box below so that you can check that out if you haven't already seen it. And there are also PDF elements for templates for these elements of this applique. I have gone ahead and quilted it. Got the batting and the backing, I've got it quilted, and what I'm going to do is make two of these. I'm going to show you the quilting on the second one here in a few minutes, but first I just want to just share with you how I've been creating these. I am using my the dryer sheets, used dryer sheets, to create my stripped piecing here. It's a stripped foundation piecing, and so I've created this block here, and I've made a total of 4. They're going to be in the center of this table runner, and the 2 flower petals are going to be on each side. So right here I have laid my backing and my batting down first. With the backing, the wrong side is up. The batting is on top of that, and I've laid my used dryer sheet on top of that. Your dryer sheets may be a completely different size than mine. Mine are around 6 by 9, but it doesn't matter. We can always make our sashing larger or smaller as we go through this. But I am going to strip this dryer sheet quilt as I go. I'm using a quilt as I go method, and I'm starting out in all 4 of my center sections with this cream strip that's going from corner to corner, and then I'll be placing these other fabric strips. I've lost them. Let me grab them. I'll be right back. All right, I found them. I'm going to place the white one here in the center across from corner to corner. What I did do, you might notice this, is I have taken a purple marking pen. This is an air and water soluble pen, and I've actually traced around the outside of my used dryer sheet because I can't actually see once I'm stitching on here where the dryer sheet is. It blends right into the batting, so I wanted some sort of a marking there which would allow me to see that as I'm strip piecing, because when I start and stop, I do want to start and stop as closely as possible on the very edge of that square. I don't want to continue. I guess it doesn't matter. You could continue since we'll be trimming all of that away, but I just wanted to see where those edges are. And now the second strip that I'm going to add here will be this pink. So right sides together, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch from this line here to that line there. That's where my dryer sheet is. I'm going to bring it up and sew a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. I am going to set my stitch length smaller, probably about a 2 or a 2.2 on this. So I'm going to bring this up. Let's move this over here. Now, can you all see? I think you can see. All right, so we've got that one sewn. Now let's find another strip that will work. This one should fit beautifully. You've got to make sure with each strip that you add that when you flip it over, there is enough on each end to cover the area that needs to be covered. And that's another reason that purple line there is very helpful for me. I can see exactly where I need to make sure my rectangle is being covered. To find the rectangle, which is basically buried beneath all of the foundation string piecing here, you can simply, this is what I did with this block, I flipped the rectangle over, turned up the batting and the backing so that all that was left was the rough edges of the fabric. Trim that away, just kind of gives me a good idea of where the rectangle actually is, the dryer sheet rectangle. And I'm going to trim this away, and I'm going to do that on all four sides. Just going to get rid of this excess here. You kind of have a good idea now of where that rectangle is back in there, and I'll do it at the top. Flip it on its face there, take the batting and the backing, bring it up toward me, lay my ruler down there, and just trim away the excess. And do that on all four sides. When I started doing the quilting as you go on this dryer sheet, which is on the batting and the backing, I'm simply putting all of the strips on there. I made sure that my batting and backing was actually larger than the rectangle of the used dryer sheet. And now I can actually trim it away, and which is what I've done on this one right here. It's all trimmed up. In front of me here, I've laid out the strips in the order, I guess, in which they're going to be going together, although we're going to start in the middle and then work on the outside edges. Our outside edges are going to remain raw. They're going to be raw edges like this block, because next week we're going to come back and actually finish the entire outside border with another Quilt-as-you-Go border. So they'll remain raw until next week, and you need to come back and find out how we're going to be putting that border together. For the center, and I'm going to have all of these widths and sizes listed below in the PDF or in the description. Yours probably will be different sizes than mine, but I'll let you know what I am using here. I have in the center here a backing strip, and I have it laid down just like this with the wrong side facing. I have a batting strip that will go in between. I have a top stitch. This is like a cover sashing, if you will, and it's folded, it's creased lengthwise. It measures 3 3/4 inches wide by the width of the length of the rectangle. And I'm going to be putting this together first. What I'm going to do is place the raw edges on this rectangle just like that. So I've got the cover strip up against the rectangle. I'm going to move the batting out of the way for the time being. Then I'm going to take the backing strip and right sides against the back of this same rectangle. So you'll see here I've got the backing and the front, the cover sashing, and I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance right down here through all of it. So let me get it up to the machine and I'll stitch that. If you use a walking foot, I did have my walking foot on earlier when I was quilting this block, and I put my my 1/4 inch seam foot back on. I should have left my walking foot on. It does help for the stitching of all of this thick fabric. So if you have a walking foot, do that. I have it laying here on the table. What we need to do now is get this rectangle attached to that backing strip. So we're simply going to bring them together, right sides together. So there's the backing strip and there's the rectangle, the side section. We're going to go ahead and sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance down that strip. So as I'm sewing here, I'm looking at the wrong side of the backing strip, which is matching to the right side of the backing. So right sides together here, and I'm looking at the wrong side of that backing strip. And we're sewing a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I've just let all the extra come off the bottom here. Sometimes it's nice just to have a little extra down there. So there we go. Now that entire section is connected, And this is going to be brought over, and we're going to top stitch and do some stitching in the center. Before we do that, we're going to add our batting. I have placed the batting in that area there. So the batting is down inside, and they're 1-inch wide batting strips. And now I'm going to flip this cover sashing over, and I want it to extend just beyond the seam allowance, and I'll probably use a few pins here and just pin it to ensure it stays there. So I'm going to come down here and just pin a few areas there just to make sure that the folded edge of the cover strip goes across and covers that seam allowance from where we attached that rectangle. And so there we go. Now what I'm going to do first of all is edge stitch along here, and then I can do some additional stitching in the center there. You can do whatever you want. You can do some fancy quilting there if you'd like to, but right now my concern is just to get this attached. So I'm going to go ahead and do an edge stitch right down that side. So it is attached. I've done an edge stitch there. Now what you will definitely want to do is some kind of top stitching. Even if you don't do some fancy stitching, at least do some top stitching down each side, which will secure that batting strip in place. So I'm going to come out, I'm probably going to edge stitch here as well so that it matches this side, and then I'll bring my foot, I'll use my foot to come over another 1/4 inch from that edge stitching on both sides, which will secure my batting strip in place. So there is the edge stitch on both sides. Now I'm going to go in a 1/4 inch on each side. I'm just going to use my foot. I've got a 1/4 inch foot on each side, so I can use a 1/4 inch on this side to stitch, and then I'll do the same thing on the opposite side here in just a minute. I'm just using my foot to follow that edge stitch. And again, all this excess down here will get trimmed away. But there we go. So I've got the edge stitch and I've got the 1/4 inch stitch, and I'm going to do a 1/4 inch stitch stitching line away from that edging. And I'll have that strip in there secure. There we go. So now the strip is secure and this has been attached. Now we're going to work at attaching the 2 outer sashings. We're basically going to follow the same technique. I'm just going to set the batting aside for right now. The backing strip is here. The top strip is here. I'm going to make this, attach this right sides together on the front. And then the backing will be right sides to right sides there, just like we did with the other one. Trying to do this without pins. You might want to use pins, but here I've got it ready to go and to get stitched. There's the front, there is the back, and we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance again down this edge. And again, if you have a walking foot, when you're walking over all of this fabric, it does help with a walking foot. Sometimes the sewing machine, the regular foot, pushes the fabric a little bit. So if you have a walking foot, it's a great idea to put it on. I should have mine on, but I'm dealing with it. Okay, so now this is ready to have the batting placed inside there. I'm going to take this up to the iron and press it. I'm going to press this direction. I'm going to press the backing away from it here as well. But the strip itself can get placed in there, and then what you can do to secure it is an edge stitch. and you might want to pin that starting at the top all the way down, and do an edge stitch right there, which will catch your batting and ensure that it stays secure in there. Let me go do the pressing first. I'll be right back. I've just pressed everything, and it really did press nicely. So my batting is in there. This is the front sashing, that's the back sashing. I am going to make sure that batting stays in there by doing an edge stitch about, maybe 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. So I'm going to do that real quick. So I'm using the red line on the 1/4 inch presser foot, and I am stitching along the edge there to secure the batting. It worked beautifully. Now we'll attach the other side to get the sashing attached for it. I'm going to lay that one aside there. Right sides together on the top of the rectangle, and then the batting strip, right sides together on the back there. And then we will, again, sew 1/4 of an inch down that edge. All right. So there's the top and the backing. I'm going to press it so that they're pressed away from the rectangles. Then I'm going to again insert this batting and fold this over, press it, and do an 1/8 of an inch edge stitch. Then the next thing we need to do is cut our strips to attach this block to the flower block. I've laid out the blocks in the way that they're going to be put together. There's going to be a sashing strip between these 4 rectangles. There's going to be a sashing strip between this rectangle and a flower block, and there will be a sashing strip between this rectangle and the flower block there. And so you can have fun with your rectangles however you want to do the foundation strip piecing. As you can see, I've got mine coming in diagonals, kind of like a little chevron, if you will, coming to the center. And we're going to use the same technique that we used before. We're simply going to set aside the batting, and then we're going to attach the backing strip to the back of one side. We'll attach the folded lengthwise cover sashing to the front, just like that, and we're going to sew 1/4 inch seam allowance down that side. So this is the center. I have it stitched on there. I'm going to go ahead and press it. I'm going to press the back so that it's nice and flat, and press the front so that it's nice and flat. And of course, before we can put that batting strip in there, we need to attach this section to this section. So again, I'm going to place it right sides together. The backing is laid right sides together with this section, and we'll sew 1/4 inch seam allowance to attach those 2 pieces. I've pinned that so it's a little easier for you to see. So I have pinned the backing, which has been attached to this side, up against the back of the opposing side, so that I've got a completely connected rectangles here. So now I'm going to sew that 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure you can see what I'm sewing here. All right, now this might make more sense. As I open it, you can see the backing strip is right in the middle there. And this is the front, which will come over and be attached over here with an edge stitch. But this is when we will place our batting in there. But before I do that, I want to just get everything pressed. So I'm going to go press it and then put that batting inside there, and then I'll come back and we'll edge stitch. The batting is inside there. I've got it all pressed, and I've got this pinned down on this side. I will be edge stitching this I'm making sure that I'm covering the stitching line below. I don't want that stitching line below to show. So I'm going to go ahead and edge stitch this, and then I'm going to edge stitch on the opposite side, and then I'm going to bring it in 1/4 inch and do another top stitch. That will secure that batting strip inside there. These 4 rectangles are now attached. They've got their center cover strips in the center. They have the sashings on the outside edge. And these are left raw because we're going to be attaching an entire border that we'll be doing next week, a Quilt-as-you-Go border. And so now what we want to do is use the same technique to attach the block to the rectangles. So we've got the backing, we've got a batting, and we've got the folded, wrong sides together, folded cover sashing. So we're going to follow the same technique to get these two attached. So we'll set the batting aside for the time being. We'll lay the raw edges against the top of the rectangle here. And we're going to put this backing strip underneath. And as the backings, these have gotten a little bit longer, and I've been using pins just to make sure that everything stays together well. But I've got the backing strip, the rectangle is in the center, and then the cover sashing is on the top, and I'm going to sew out 1/4 inch seam allowance, but I'm going to pin this first. You'll see it up on the machine. Here I've pinned the cover sashing on the rectangle here, right sides, and on the back you'll see the batting strip is right sides to the back. So it's all ready to get sewn. I'm going to sew 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. And then just as we did before, we're going to attach this section to this block with the backing. So right sides, backing to the right side of the backing here. And I'm going to pin all of that and sew that together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So both sections are now attached so that ultimately we can get this edge stitched over on this side. But first we need to attach or place that batting strip inside there. So I'm going to take it to the ironing machine, make sure this batting strip in the back is, this backing strip is pressed as well as the batting. I'll be right back. Whenever you place your batting strips in there, make sure that it lays nice and flat, that it's snug up to the seam allowances and everything is nice and flat. You don't want a bunch of bulk, and you really don't want the batting underneath of the seam allowance because there is batting in the seam allowance already, so you don't need additional batting there. Just make sure it's within that space there between the seam allowances. Then you're going to bring this over, and I am going to stitch it, or pin it, excuse me, before I stitch it, so that everything stays in place. And then I'm going to edge stitch down this side, top stitch, and edge stitch here as well. I have this pinned, and it's ready to be edge stitched, and then I'll continue with top stitching and edge stitch on this side as well. This table runner is going to be a nice long table runner. So here is the first block. It has been attached, and I've edge stitched everything. I've got a thread here to get rid of. And it has been attached to this center section. And my center section is quite large because I have 4 rectangles lengthwise in the middle of it. So I can put a nice big sheet cake if I have a birthday cake or a huge floral arrangement. There's a lot that I could put in the center here. And then we're going to use the same process with the top cover sashing, the batting, and the backing strip, which will attach this side to the last block. And let me grab that block where I'm going to show you how I've done some quilting on that. I cut a background square or a backing square and a batting square larger than the block itself, because as I'm quilting it, it's going to kind of bring things in, and then we'll square it up once we're done. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use some regular quilting cotton thread, and I'm going to first of all just outline all of these petals all the way around. That's what I did on the other one, and then I'll echo that, and I'll continue echoing and bring that echo out. I will probably do some circles on the center. I might do some vines on the center of these flowers, just like I did on this. Let me show you this. So as you can see, I echoed around all of these. I did a couple of circles in the center, and I created some vines in there just so that the stripped leaves or floral flowers were secured nicely. So that's what I'm going to do here. I have to get my machine all set up and ready to go and get my quilting done. I did attach my walking foot for the quilting purposes, and just regular cotton thread top and bottom is what I'm going to be quilting with today. I have done an outline stitch first around each of the petals, and then I did an echo stitch around that outline. So I've got one echo stitch that is complete all the way around. You could actually stop quilting at this point. You don't need to continue quilting. I am going to go ahead and duplicate what I've done on this other block where I've got echo quilting all the way out to the edge. So I'm going to continue doing that all the way out, and then I'm going to do some simple vines in here. I'm just using the edge of my walking foot here as I follow the previous echo stitching line, and then I'll just continue going around the block, echoing all the way around all of the petals. With each one of these echoes, I'm beginning and ending off the edge into the batting portion, and so those stitches are going to be secured with a cross stitch when I attach the sashing. So I'm not worrying about back stitching any of that. I'm just starting in the batting, doing the stitch, and ending out in the batting. That one corner is finished. Now I'm just going to continue working my way around, echo stitching. I have the second daisy block already quilted, and I've squared it up. It's ready to be attached to the balance of this table runner, and I'm going to use the same technique again. I've got my backing strip, I've got my batting, and I have my cover sashing, which is folded and creased there. Again, I'm going to place the cover sashing on the top here. I'm going to take the backing strip and apply it right sides together to the back of this. I'm going to stitch that together, 1/4 inch seam allowance, press them open. Once they're nicely pressed, then I'm going to attach this backing strip to the rectangle, so this whole thing is one unit, and then I'll press that and add my batting and do my edge stitching and top stitching. So I have this pinned to the front, raw edges up here, and the back has the backing strip attached. I'm going to sew that 1/4 inch seam allowance just like I did with all of the others. Again, I have my top sashing attached. My backing strip is attached. Now I need to attach these 2 units together. So I'll take the backing strip and the backing of the other unit, and I'm going to stitch them together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. There we go. It is attached. It's a unit now. Now what I'm going to do is press it, and then I'm going to take my batting and get that placed in there and bring this over, pin it down, do an edge stitching on both sides, top stitching 1/4 inch away from both of those, and the center will be ready. The table runner is 48.5 inches in length, so it's quite long. There's one block. I've got the flowers on each end. I have the 4 rectangles in the center, and here's the other flower. So next week we're going to be making the borders. They're going to be Quilt-as-you-Go borders as well, all the way around the outside edge of this table runner. So I hope you'll join me for part 3 of the Quilt-as-you-Go in foundation strip piecing class. I have really enjoyed putting this table runner together with all of the strip piecing of the flower petals, the center circles, and the rectangles, and then of course putting it together in the Quilt-as-you-Go method just is a fast way to be able to get a quilt ready to go and completely quilted. So I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you so much for stopping by. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and share my videos with your friends and quilt guilds. And until next week, happy quilting.